Okay, so what we're going to talk about here is MIBs, okay, and what we can do with them in IMC. MIB stands for Management Information Base, and MIB files are written in a language called ASN, Abstract Syntax Notation, which is a definition language. It's been around a long time. So, why do we need to load MIBs? Well, we've got devices that we want to set up custom monitoring for, so they're not necessarily devices that IMC supports out of the box. I say common examples will be things like data center type equipment, maybe some network equipment which isn't already supported by IMC. So sort of starting point is to identify what information we can retrieve from them, maybe what trap definitions they have, and all of that information you'll find in the MIB files for the particular device. Now the MIB files I'm working with here are two Cisco MIB files. First MIB file we're looking at is a MIB file called Cisco NVON MIB. The Cisco NVON MIB is the MIB file that identifies all the different environmental monitors that you can set on Cisco devices. So things like temperature, fan speed, the state of power supplies. Now, forward for a MIB is you have the MIB definition. So in this case we've got a MIB defined called Cisco NVON MIB. The MIB file then starts at the begin, and at the bottom you'll have an end. The important thing when we load MIB files is you need to review the import section. The import section identifies what attributes or parameters the reader of this MIB file, in this example IMC, will need to understand in order to make sense of the MIB file. So if we look at the import section here, we're defining attributes called module identity, object type, notification type, gauge, integer. And those attributes are defined in a MIB file called snmpv2smi. You will find that with MIB files, there's often the term SMI crops up quite frequently. It stands for Starter Management Interface. And the SMI file for a particular entity normally identifies the top level of its MIB tree. Then we've got these other things which are defined in snmpv2tc, and you will find that, and IMC is no exception, most network management systems will have those MIBs preloaded because they're core to anything a network management tool does. These are the MIBs that store things like MIB2 definitions and core SNMP attribute types. Then we've got again these objects here being defined in that one, and the one that we need to watch out for is this guy. So here we are referring to we're going to refer to an object or an attribute called Cisco MGMT, and Cisco MGMT is defined in a MIB file called Cisco SMI. Okay, so in order for us to make sense of this MIB file, we need to understand these objects from their corresponding MIB files. So in other words, before I could probably load this MIB file into IMC, we would have to have that MIB file loaded first, the Cisco SMI MIB file. So let's see why we need to do that. We define an attribute called Cisco NVON MIB. Okay. That then defines, with a MIB definition, then we define things like when it was last updated, the name of it, a description for it. And the important thing down here is to work out the OID number for Cisco NVON MIB. We need to know what the OID number for Cisco MGT is, and then the Cisco NVON MIB will be .13. Okay, so clearly that gives us a problem, because unless we know what the OID number for Cisco MGT is, we're not going to be able to make sense of this. So let's go and have a look at the MIB file that defined Cisco MGMT, which was the Cisco SMI MIB file, which is this one here. So if we look at this one, we can see that this refers to a thing called Cisco products, okay, or Cisco, and Cisco's number is whatever Cisco is, or whatever enterprise number is, .9. So again, to make sense of this MIB file, it gives you your import modules. So we can see that all that you need to understand with this one is what these three attributes mean, which are defined in the snmpv2smi file. So Cisco will be whatever enterprise OID number is, .9. Cisco products will be whatever the Cisco OID number was, .2. And then somewhere in here, if I do a search for it, we should find that attribute that we were looking for in the other file, which is Cisco MGMT. And there you go. So Cisco MGMT is going to be whatever Cisco's OID number is, .9. Okay, so what I want to try and do now is I'm going to try and load these MIB files into IMC. Okay, so to do that, we go to System, Resource Manager, MIB Management, so that's System, Resource Manager, MIB Management. And then from here, we click on the Home button, so that's the button there. It looks like a house. It says Load MIB Files. We click on it. And what I'm going to try and do for demonstration purposes, I'm going to try and load the NVON MIB first. First thing I need to do is I'm going to create a folder for it. Okay, so when you load a MIB file in, you specify which folder you want to put it into. So I'm going to create a folder. I've already got one here called Cisco, so I'm just going to work with that one. If I hadn't got it, I can go right hand mouse button, new folder, give it a name. And then what we then do is we click on this button here, which is the we click on compile MIB file button. So I click on that, and then from here we select the files we want to load in. So the ones that I want are in drive E, leave it on E, IMC Mibs. And what I need to do is I need to rename them with a .mib extension. Okay, so when you download these MIBs from Cisco or various other websites, they normally have a .my extension. You need to rename them to a .mib. I'm going to try and load the NVON one first, and we'll see what happens. Click Compile. Select the directory you want to put into, so click Compile. And there you can see that it's telling me that it's not able to bring it up because it's lacking a dependency, and it tells you there that the dependency you need to load first is Cisco SMI. So I said the way IMC worked that out was it looked at the import section for this MIB file, and it identified what MIBs it needs to understand before it can process it, and it's identified this as being missing. So now I'm going to try it again, but this time I'm going to load the other MIB file first. So if I click on, again, compile MIB file, browse, bring in the SMI file, click on Cisco and click compile. Okay, that's looking good. So we've managed to load the Cisco SMI file. Close that. Now if I try and reload that NVON MIB, we should be good to go. So click Browse, Cisco NVON MIB, click Open. I'm going to put it in the Cisco folder, click Compile, and this time it's worked, okay, because we had the dependency. So I'm going to close that. So to see what's happened, if we look at the MIB, remember from the MIB file we said that the Cisco MGMT is going to be inside the Cisco MIB tree. So if I click on MIB file, ISO org DOD internet private enterprise. So the OID number for private enterprise is 136141. And now what we should have seen from the MIB files, if I then expand that out, we should now have an attribute for Cisco Okay, so let me just come out with this and go back in again. May have had a caching issue, so MIB management. Okay, so there's a two-phase process we need to go through. So at the moment, the MIB that we've just compiled is not loaded into the runtime database. Okay, so once I've compiled the MIB, I now need to go and tell it to load it into IMC. So I go back into the loaded MIB files, go into my folder, And at the top panel it's giving me a list of what MIBs have actually loaded into the runtime IMC database. So I need to load these two in. So I click them, upload them. Okay, that's looking good. So now if I go back to MIB tree, ISO, org, DOD, internet, private, enterprise, and there we can see we got Cisco. So if we click on Cisco, we can see Cisco's number is 136.141.9, and if we go back to the file just to verify that, so Cisco SMI, we see that Cisco, the definition for Cisco is whatever the OID number for enterprise was, .9. We also know that Cisco MGMT is whatever Cisco was, coincidentally .9. So let's just go back there and see that. Okay, so if I go into Cisco, then we should see a Cisco MGMT, and there we go, and its OID number is 136.14199, and so on. So then if we go in there, then we know that we should see the envon MIB, etc. So that's how we load a MIB file into IMC. I say, well, it's a relatively straightforward process, but the issue that we may have is that we need to find these dependency MIB files first.